The rescue ship moved slowly through the darkness of space. All around it floated broken pieces of metal, shattered glass, and the remains of what was once a beautiful transport vessel. The ship was called the Starbound Dawn, and it belonged to the Galactic Union. Inside, creatures from many different worlds worked together. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had 6 arms or 3 eyes. And among them was a single human woman named Una Park. Una was 32 years old. She had brown hair that she kept tied back and tired eyes that had seen too much sadness in the medical bay. She was a medic, trained to heal wounds and save lives. But today, as she looked through the window at the floating wreckage, she knew there would be few lives to save. The destroyed ship had belonged to the Valari. They were a proud species that looked like wolves walking on 2 legs. Their bodies were covered in silver fur, and their eyes glowed like golden coins. The Valari were known across the galaxy as fierce warriors. They valued strength, honor, and family above all things. A Valari would die before abandoning their pack. But someone had attacked this ship. Pirates, most likely. The kind of criminals who hid in the dark spaces between stars and preyed on travelers. They had killed everyone aboard and taken whatever they wanted. Now only silence remained. Commander Vess stood at the center of the bridge. Vess was a Karathi, a species with 6 limbs and hard blue skin like stone. The commander's voice was deep and calm as orders were given. Search teams would go out. They would look for survivors, but nobody expected to find any. Una joined the 3rd search team. She wore a protective suit and carried a medical kit on her back. The team floated through the wreckage, using small jets to move between the broken pieces of the ship. Bodies floated past them. Valari adults, their silver fur stained dark. Una closed her eyes for a moment and whispered a quiet prayer. She did not know if anyone was listening, but it felt right to honor the dead. The search continued for 2 hours. Nothing alive, only ghosts and grief. Then Una saw it. A small pod, barely bigger than a closet, wedged between 2 twisted metal beams. It was a survival pod, the kind designed to protect a single passenger during an emergency. The light on its side was still blinking green. Power remained. And that meant there might be life inside. Una called to her team leader, a tall insect-like creature named Breel. Together, they cut through the metal beams and pulled the pod free. They brought it back to the Starbound Dawn. The whole crew gathered to watch as the pod was opened. Inside, curled into a tight ball of silver fur, was a small Valari cub. He could not have been older than 4 solar cycles. His fur was matted and dirty. His small body shook with fear. And from his throat came a sound that made everyone step back. A high, piercing cry, a wail of pure terror and loss. The cub screamed as if his soul was being torn apart. Una felt her heart break at the sound. The crew tried to help. Valari counselors were brought from another Union ship. They spoke to the cub in his native language. They offered him food and water. They tried to wrap him in warm blankets, but the cub refused everything. He snapped his small teeth at anyone who came close. He scratched with his tiny claws, and he never stopped crying. Day 1 passed. The crying continued. Day 2 passed. The cub's voice grew hoarse, but still he wailed. By day 3, the crew was exhausted. The sound echoed through every corridor of the ship. Nobody could sleep. Nobody could focus. Commander Vess called a meeting in the command room. "The cub is beyond our help," Vess said. The commander's 6 arms were folded in a gesture of frustration. His trauma is too deep. The Valari counselors have failed. We will transport him to a Valari orphan station on the planet Korth 5. They have facilities for cases like this. The other officers nodded. It seemed like the only option. What else could they do? Una sat in the corner of the room, listening. She had not been invited to the meeting, but nobody had told her to leave either. Humans were still new to the Galactic Union. Most species did not think much of them. Humans were small. They had no claws or venom or special powers. They could not read minds or breathe underwater or survive in the vacuum of space. To the rest of the galaxy, humans were soft, fragile, and unremarkable. But Yuna had been watching the cub through the medical bay window for 3 days. She had watched him cry himself to exhaustion and then wake up crying again. She had watched him flinch away from every hand that reached for him. And she had noticed something that the others had missed. The cub was not just scared. He was alone. Completely and totally alone in a way that went beyond physical danger. His family was dead. His pack was gone. The foundation of his entire world had been destroyed. He was not crying because he was hurt. He was crying because he had forgotten what safety felt like. Yuna understood that feeling. When she was 7 years old, her parents had died in a shuttle accident. She remembered lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by strangers who spoke in calm voices and offered her food she did not want. She remembered the emptiness inside her chest, the feeling that nothing would ever be okay again. Her grandmother had saved her, not with medicine or therapy or professional counseling. Her grandmother had simply sat beside her bed, held her hand, and stayed. Night after night, day after day. She had hummed old songs and told quiet stories, and never once asked Yuna to stop crying. She had just been there, a warm and steady presence, until the emptiness began to fill again. Maybe that was what this cub needed. Not specialists, not facilities, just someone who would stay. Yuna stood up. Every eye in the room turned to her. She felt small under their alien gazes, but she did not sit back down. "Commander," she said, "I would like to try something." Vast stared at her. The commander's face was hard to read, but there was something like surprise in those stone-colored eyes. "You are the human medic, yes? What could you possibly offer that Valari specialists could not?" Yuna did not have a good answer. She only had a feeling, a memory of her grandmother's hand wrapped around her own. "I do not know," she admitted, "but I would like to try." The room was silent. Some of the officers exchanged glances. A few made sounds that might have been laughter. A human, thinking she could succeed where others had failed. It was almost funny, but Commander Vest did not laugh. The commander studied Yuna for a long moment. Then those 6 arms unfolded. "1 hour," Vest said. "You have 1 hour with the cub. No more. If you fail, we proceed with the transfer." Yuna nodded. "Thank you, Commander." She left the room before anyone could change their mind. Her heart was beating fast as she walked toward the isolation room where the cub was being kept. She could already hear his cries through the metal walls. That terrible, broken sound that had haunted the ship for 3 days. She stopped outside the door. Through the small window, she could see the cub pressed into the far corner of the room. His small body was shaking. His golden eyes were wild with fear. Yuna took a deep breath. She did not know if she could help him. She did not know if anything could help him. But she was going to try. She opened the door and stepped inside. The door closed behind Yuna with a soft hiss. The room was small and bare. White walls, white floor, a single bed in one corner with blankets that had been torn to pieces. In the opposite corner, pressed as far back as he could go, was the Valari cub. He saw her immediately. His golden eyes locked onto her face, and his lips pulled back to show his small, sharp teeth. A growl rose from his throat, mixing with the exhausted whimpers that he could not seem to stop. His fur was standing up along his spine. Every part of his body was screaming one message: "Stay away." Yuna did not move toward him. Instead, she slowly lowered herself to the floor. She sat down with her back against the wall near the door, as far from the cub as she could be while still being in the same room. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. Then she did nothing. She simply sat there, breathing quietly, looking at the floor in front of her. She did not speak. She did not try to offer food or comfort. She did not reach out her hands. She just existed in the same space as the cub, asking nothing from him. The cub watched her with confused eyes. His growling continued, but it was weaker now. He seemed uncertain. Every other person who had entered this room had tried to approach him. They had tried to touch him, to hold him, to make him stop crying. This human was different. She was just sitting there. Minutes passed, 10, then 15. The cub's growling faded. His body slowly relaxed, though his eyes never left Yuna's face. She could feel him watching her, studying her, trying to understand what kind of threat she was. Yuna began to hum. It was a simple melody. An old song from Earth, from a country called Korea, where her grandmother had been born. The song had no words, or at least Yuna had forgotten them. But the melody remained. It was soft and slow, like rain falling on a quiet night. Her grandmother used to hum this song during thunderstorms, when young Yuna would climb into her bed and hide under the blankets. The sound filled the small room. It was such a human sound. No other species in the galaxy made music quite like humans did. Their songs carried emotion in a way that was hard to explain. This melody spoke of sadness, yes, but also of comfort. Of the promise that storms would pass and morning would come. The cub's ears twitched. They were large ears, meant to catch every sound. They turned toward Yuna like flowers turning toward the sun. His whimpering grew quieter. His breathing slowed. Still, Yuna did not move. She continued to hum, continued to sit peacefully against the wall. She let the song flow out of her like water from a gentle stream. 20 minutes passed. The cub's body had uncurled slightly. He was no longer pressed into the corner. He was still watching her, but the fear in his eyes had changed to something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or the beginning of trust. Yuna stopped humming. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not heavy or threatening. It was soft, like a held breath. Slowly, very slowly, Yuna extended her hand. She did not reach toward the cub. She simply held her hand out, palm up, resting it on her knee. An offering. An invitation. Nothing more. The cub stared at her hand. His nose twitched. Valari had a powerful sense of smell, much stronger than humans. They could detect fear, anger, sickness, and lies through scent alone. The cub was reading her now, searching for danger in the invisible clouds of chemicals that surrounded her body. What did he find? Yuna did not know, but she knew what she was feeling in that moment. She was not afraid. She was not angry. She felt only a deep, quiet sadness for this small creature who had lost everything, and a sincere wish to help him feel less alone. The cub took a step forward, then another. His movements were careful, ready to run at any moment. But he kept coming, drawn by something he did not understand. He stopped a few feet away from Yuna. His nose was working hard, sniffing the air. Humans smelled different from other species in the galaxy. They did not have the sharp musk of predators or the chemical warning signals of poisonous creatures. Human scent was simple, warm, organic. There was something almost comforting about it, like the smell of grass after rain or bread baking in an oven. The cub came closer. He was within arm's reach now. Yuna held her breath, but kept her body relaxed. She did not want to scare him away. His small nose touched her fingertips. The contact lasted only a second before he pulled back, but it was enough. Yuna felt a surge of hope in her chest. The first real hope she had felt since finding him in that survival pod. She waited. Patience was not easy for humans. Their lives were short compared to many galactic species, and they always seemed to be in a hurry. But Yuna's grandmother had taught her the value of waiting. Some things could not be rushed. Healing was one of them. Trust was another. The cub touched her hand again. This time, he did not pull away. His nose pressed against her palm, and she felt the warm puff of his breath against her skin. He was still sniffing, still searching for something. Maybe he was searching for a reason to run. But he was not finding one. Yuna turned her hand slowly and let her fingers brush against the fur on the side of his face. It was soft, so soft, like the finest silk. The cub flinched but did not retreat. His golden eyes looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw something other than fear in them. She saw a question. "Can I trust you?" Yuna did not answer with words. Words meant nothing to a child who had watched his entire world burn. Instead, she answered with action. She placed her hand over his chest, directly above his heart. The effect was immediate. The cub's whole body went still. His eyes widened. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palm, racing like a frightened bird. But she could also feel something else. Through her hand, pressed against his thin chest, he could feel her heartbeat. Human hearts beat slowly compared to Valari hearts. Her pulse was steady and calm, a gentle rhythm that seemed to say, "I am here. I am not leaving. You are safe." The cub's breathing changed. The tension in his muscles began to release. His heart, which had been racing so fast, started to slow down. It was as if her heartbeat was teaching his heart how to be calm. For the first time in 3 days, the cub stopped crying. The silence was almost shocking. For so long, the ship had echoed with his wails. Now, there was only the quiet hum of the engines and the soft sound of two beings breathing together. The cub leaned into Yuna's hand. His eyes closed. A small sound came from his throat, but it was not a cry. It was something else. Something that might have been the beginning of peace. Yuna felt tears on her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. She just sat there, her hand over the cub's heart, letting him feel the steady rhythm that promised he was no longer alone. Outside the room, unseen by Yuna, Commander Vess stood watching through the small window in the door. The commander's stone-colored face showed no emotion, but those ancient eyes were thoughtful. Behind Vess, Dr. Haniel Kim, the ship's xenobiologist, was staring at a medical scanner. "This is remarkable," Haniel whispered. "His stress hormones are dropping. His vital signs are stabilizing. Whatever she is doing, it is working." Commander Vess said nothing. The commander simply watched as the human woman held the broken cub, sharing her heartbeat like a gift. 1 hour. That was what Vess had given her. But already, it was clear that something extraordinary was happening in that small white room. Something that the Galactic Union had never seen before. A human had done what Valari specialists could not. She had reached a child who had forgotten how to feel safe. And she had done it with nothing but patience, a song, and the simple, steady beating of her heart. News traveled fast on the starward dawn. By the next morning, everyone on the ship knew what had happened. The human Meg had calmed the Valari cub. The crying had stopped. The impossible had become real. Crew members from a dozen different species gathered in the corridors near the medical bay, hoping to catch a glimpse of the pair. They whispered to each other in their native languages, trying to understand what they had witnessed. How had a human, of all creatures, succeeded where trained Valari counselors had failed? Dr. Haniel Kim had the same question. Haniel was 35 years old, with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped working. As the ship's xenobiologist, it was Haniel's job to understand how different species functioned. Now, sitting in the research lab surrounded by data screens, Haniel was studying everything known about human biology. "There has to be an explanation," Haniel muttered, scrolling through medical files. Something scientific. Something we can measure. Commander Vest stood nearby, all 6 arms folded behind the commander's back. The Valari counselors believe it was luck. They say the cub simply exhausted himself. Haniel shook their head. No, I was monitoring his vital signs. The change happened the moment she touched him. His heart rate dropped. His stress hormones decreased. Something in her physical contact triggered a calming response. The commander made a sound that might have been interest. Explain. Haniel pulled up a new screen. On it was a diagram of a human body, with certain areas highlighted in different colors. Humans are unusual creatures. They evolved on a planet where they were neither the strongest nor the fastest. They survived through cooperation, through community, through touch. Touch? Commander Vest repeated. Yes, human bodies are designed for physical contact. When they touch another being, they release chemicals that promote bonding and reduce stress. Their skin is extremely sensitive. Their body temperature is regulated to be warm and comforting. And their heartbeat. Haniel paused, highlighting a new section of the diagram. The human heartbeat is slow and steady compared to most species. It creates a rhythmic pattern that other creatures find naturally soothing. Commander Vest considered this information. In all the commander's years of service, humans had been a mystery. They were one of the youngest species in the Galactic Union. They had no special abilities, no advanced natural weapons. Yet they had spread across the stars with remarkable speed. Perhaps there was more to them than met the eye. You are saying that humans evolved to be comforting? The commander asked. Haniel nodded. In a way, yes. They survived because they took care of each other. They carried their young for years, not months. They formed family groups that lasted entire lifetimes. Touch was essential to their survival. And somehow, that biological trait translates across species. The commander's stone-colored face remained unreadable. Interesting. But does any of this matter? The cub is calm now, but he cannot stay with the human. He must be raised among his own kind. Haniel was silent for a moment. Through the window of the lab, it was possible to see into the medical bay where Yuna and the cub were resting. The small Valari was curled against Yuna's side, his silver fur rising and falling with each peaceful breath. One of his small hands gripped the fabric of her uniform, holding on as if she might disappear. I am not sure it will be that simple, Haniel said quietly. The xenobiologist was right. Over the next few days, it became clear that something had changed in the cub. He had formed a connection with Yuna that went beyond simple gratitude. When she left the room to eat or use the bathroom, he would whimper and stare at the door until she returned. When she slept, he curled at her feet like a guard dog. When she walked through the corridors of the ship, he followed 2 steps behind, his small hand clutching the edge of her uniform. The crew gave the cub a name. They called him Taro, after a small earth vegetable that was tough on the outside but soft on the inside. Yuna thought it suited him perfectly. But the Galactic Union had rules. Humans were not approved foster species for Valari young. There were reasons for this, practical and cultural. Valari cubs needed to learn the ways of their people. They needed to hunt, to fight, to follow the ancient codes of honor that had defined their species for thousands of years. A human could not teach these things. A message was sent to the Valari High Council. They responded quickly. A representative would be dispatched to retrieve the cub and transport him to a proper Valari colony. His name was Greymane, and he was an elder of great standing among his people. Yuna received the news with a heavy heart. She had known this moment would come. She had always known that Taro was not hers to keep. But knowing something and accepting it were very different things. Taro seemed to sense her sadness. That night, he climbed into her lap and pressed his forehead against her chest. He listened to her heartbeat, that slow and steady rhythm that had first brought him peace. His golden eyes looked up at her with complete trust. "You will be okay," Yuna whispered to him. "The Valari will take care of you. They are your people." Taro did not respond. He simply held on to her tighter. Greymane arrived 3 days later. He was an old Valari, his silver fur streaked with gray and white. His eyes were the color of old gold, and they held the weight of many years. He walked with the confidence of a warrior who had won many battles and buried many friends. When he entered the medical bay and saw Taro, his expression softened for just a moment. Cubs were precious to the Valari. Every child lost was a wound to the entire species. "Little one," Greymane said in the Valari language, "I have come to take you home." Taro's reaction was immediate. He pressed himself against Yuna's side and bared his teeth at the elder. A low growl rose from his throat, the same warning sound he had made when he first arrived on the ship. Greymane frowned. He took a step forward, and Taro's growl became louder. The cub's small body was shaking, but not with fear. This was defiance. This was refusal. "What is this?" Greymane demanded, looking at Yuna. "What have you done to him?" "I have done nothing," Yuna said softly. "I only tried to help him." The elder studied her with those ancient eyes. Humans were strange to him. Small, soft creatures with no claws or fangs. How could such a being have captured the loyalty of a Valari cub? Greymane reached out a hand toward Taro. "Come, child. I will not hurt you." Taro responded with a scream. It was the same terrible sound that had once echoed through the ship for 3 days straight, that piercing wail of loss and terror. But there was something else in it now. Something new. "No, I will not go. You cannot take me from her." A medical scanner on a nearby shelf shattered from the force of the sound. Greymane stepped back, his ears flattened against his skull. Even he, a battle-hardened warrior, was shaken by the intensity of the cub's rejection. Yuna wrapped her arms around Taro, trying to calm him. She could feel his heart pounding against her chest, fast and frightened. It is okay," she whispered. "I am here. I am not leaving." The scream faded to whimpers, and Taro buried his face against her shoulder. His small hands gripped her uniform so tightly that his claws tore small holes in the fabric. Dr. Haniel had been watching from the doorway. Now the xenobiologist stepped forward, holding a tablet full of data. "Elder Greymane," Haniel said carefully, "I believe you need to see this." Haniel showed the elder the results of days of medical scans. The data told a clear story. Taro's brain had formed new neural pathways in the days since meeting Yuna. His stress response had fundamentally changed. His body now associated safety and comfort with her presence and her alone. "It is called imprinting," Haniel explained. Young Valari sometimes form these bonds with parental figures during times of extreme trauma. It is rare, but it is well documented in your species' medical literature. Greymane's expression grew dark. Imprinting is meant to occur with Valari caregivers. Not with? With this. He gestured at Yuna with obvious disdain. "Perhaps," Haniel agreed. "But the brain does not follow rules of what is meant to happen. The bond is formed. If you try to separate them by force, the psychological damage to the cub could be permanent." The room fell silent. Greymane stared at Taro, who was still clinging to Yuna like she was the only solid thing in a universe of chaos. The elder's face was a storm of conflicting emotions. Duty, tradition, and somewhere beneath it all, genuine concern for the child. Finally, Greymane turned and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold and spoke without looking back. "This is not over. The High Council will hear of this. One way or another, the cub will return to his people." Then he was gone, and Yuna was left holding Taro in the sudden silence. She looked down at his small face and saw his golden eyes staring up at her. There was a question in them, the same question from before. "Will you stay?" Yuna pulled him closer. "I am not going anywhere," she promised. "Whatever happens, I am here." And Taro, for the first time since his world had ended, believed her. 1 week passed after Greymane's visit. The Stalwart Dawn continued its journey through space, carrying refugees to safety and supplies to distant colonies. Life on the ship returned to something like normal. But everyone knew that the matter of Taro was not finished. Yuna tried to enjoy the quiet days while they lasted. She taught Taro simple words in her language. She showed him pictures of Earth, of blue oceans and green forests and mountains covered in white snow. She told him stories that her grandmother had once told her, tales of brave children and magical creatures and love that conquered all obstacles. Taro listened to everything with wide eyes. He was learning to trust again, slowly and carefully. He still flinched at loud noises. He still had nightmares that made him wake up crying. But each morning, when he opened his eyes and saw Yuna beside him, a small smile would appear on his face. And that smile made everything worth it. But the message from the Valari High Council arrived on the 8th day. Commander Vess called Yuna to the command room. The commander's expression was unreadable, but there was something in those stone-colored eyes that looked almost like sympathy. "The High Council has made a decision," Vess said. "They demand that the cub be returned to Valari custody. They do not recognize any bond with a human as legitimate." Yuna felt her heart sink. She had expected this, but hearing the words still hurt. "What happens now?" The commander was silent for a long moment. Then Vess gestured toward a communication screen. "Elder Greymane is requested to speak with you directly." The screen flickered to life, and Greymane's weathered face appeared. He looked tired, as if he had not slept well since leaving the ship. His golden eyes studied Yuna through the digital connection. "Human," he said. His voice was formal, cold. "I have spent many days thinking about this situation. The bond between you and the cub is unexpected, but bonds formed in trauma do not last. They are weak foundations built on desperate soil." Yuna wanted to argue, but she stayed silent. She knew that interrupting a Valari elder was considered deeply disrespectful. Greymane continued, "Our species values strength above all things. A Valari child must be raised to hunt, to fight, to survive in a harsh universe. These are not lessons that a human can teach. Your kind is soft. You do not understand what it means to be Valari." Now Yuna did speak. Her voice was quiet but steady. "With respect, Elder, I think you misunderstand what strength means." Greymane's eyes narrowed. "Explain yourself." "Strength is not just about claws in combat," Yuna said. "Strength is being there when someone is broken. Strength is patience when patience is hard. Strength is love, even when love hurts." She paused, thinking of her grandmother. "The strongest person I ever knew never lifted a weapon in her entire life. But she raised me when my parents died. She held my hand through every dark night. That is strength too." For a moment, something flickered in Greymane's eyes. Something that might have been respect, or perhaps just surprise. Humans were not known for speaking back to Valari elders. "Pretty words," Greymane said finally. "But words are wind. In the end, actions are what matter." He leaned closer to the screen. "If you truly believe you are worthy of raising a Valari child, then prove it. I invoke the right of challenge." Yuna heard Commander Vess make a sharp sound behind her. Even the commander, who rarely showed emotion, seemed alarmed. "What is the right of challenge?" Yuna asked. Greymane's expression was grim. "It is an ancient tradition. When custody of a cub is disputed, the parties involved may undergo a trial. If you complete the trial successfully, the High Council must recognize your claim. If you fail, the cub goes with me, and you will never see him again." Yuna's mouth went dry. "What kind of trial?" "A survival challenge," the elder explained. "You and the cub will be left on the moon of Keth 7 for 7 solar cycles. You must survive in the wilderness while being hunted by Valari trackers. If you last all 7 cycles, you win. If you are caught or killed, you lose." The room fell completely silent. Keth 7 was a frozen wasteland, barely habitable, even with proper equipment. The Valari trackers were elite hunters, trained from birth to pursue and capture prey. No human had ever faced such a trial. Commander Vess stepped forward. "This is unreasonable. A human cannot survive those conditions. You are asking for the impossible." Greymane's face did not change. "That is the point. If she cannot protect herself, how can she protect the cub? A Valari parent must be able to defend their young against any threat. This trial will prove whether she is worthy." Yuna thought about everything she had learned about Valari culture. They were a proud people who respected actions over words. Refusing the challenge would mean admitting she was too weak to raise Taro. It would mean giving up. And Yuna Park had never been good at giving up. "I accept," she said. Commander Vess made another sharp sound. "Lieutenant Park, think about this carefully. You are not a soldier. You are not trained for survival in hostile environments." "I know what I am," Yuna said quietly. "But I also know that Taro needs me. If there is any chance at all, that I can keep him safe, then I have to try." Greymane nodded slowly. There was something new in his eyes now. Not quite respect, but close to it. "The trial begins in 3 days. Prepare yourself, human. Keth 7 shows no mercy to the weak." The screen went dark. In the days that followed, Yuna tried to prepare as best she could. Her friend Jisoo Beek, a tactical officer on the ship, helped her study maps of Keth 7 and learn basic survival techniques. Dr. Haniel provided medical supplies and advice on how to treat frostbite and hypothermia. Even Commander Vess quietly arranged for Yuna to receive an extra thermal suit and a week's worth of emergency rations. But everyone knew the truth. The odds were against her. The Valari trackers had trained their entire lives for exactly this kind of hunt. Yuna had trained to heal wounds, not escape predators. On the night before the trial, Jisoo came to see Yuna in her quarters. Her friend's face was tight with worry. "This is insane," Jisoo said. "You know that, right? You are walking into a death trap." Yuna was packing supplies into a small bag. She did not look up. "I know. Then why? Why risk everything for a child you have known for only a few weeks?" Now Yuna did look up. Her eyes were calm, but there was steel beneath the calm. "Because he is my family now. I do not abandon family." Jisoo stared at her for a long moment. Then she let out a breath and shook her head. "You humans are all crazy. You know that." A small smile crossed Yuna's face. "So I have been told." They hugged, and Jisoo left. Yuna finished packing and then went to find Taro. The cub was in the medical bay, sitting on the bed where he had slept every night since the rescue. His golden eyes watched Yuna approach. He knew something was happening. He could smell the tension in the air, could sense the fear that surrounded everyone on the ship. "We are going on a journey," Yuna told him softly. "It will be cold and hard and scary, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Taro looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and placed his small hand over her heart, just as she had done to him on that first day. He could feel her heartbeat, slow and steady. An anchor in the storm. "I trust you," he said. They were the first words he had spoken since the destruction of his family's ship. Yuna felt tears in her eyes, but she smiled. "Then we will get through this together." The next morning, a small shuttle carried Yuna and Taro. to the frozen surface of Keth 7. Greymane watched them descend from the viewing deck of the Volari vessel that had arrived to observe the trial. The elder's face was thoughtful. Around him, the Volari trackers prepared their weapons and checked their equipment. They were confident, almost bored. This would be an easy hunt. A soft human and a frightened cub. It would be over in a day or two at most. But Greymane was not so sure. He had seen something in Yuna's eyes during their conversation. A fire that did not match her fragile body. A determination that reminded him of the best Volari warriors he had ever known. Perhaps this trial would be more interesting than anyone expected. The shuttle touched down on the icy surface of Keth 7. Yuna stepped out into the howling wind. Taro pressed close against her side. The cold hit her like a physical blow, cutting through her thermal suit and stealing the breath from her lungs. 7 days. They had to survive for 7 days. Yuna looked at the frozen wasteland stretching before her, at the jagged mountains of ice and the dark clouds that promised endless storms. Then she looked down at Taro, at his frightened golden eyes and his small hand gripping her uniform. "Come on," she said. "Let us show them what humans are made of." And together, they walked into the frozen wilderness. The first day on Keth 7 was the hardest. Yuna had studied the maps, memorized the terrain, prepared herself mentally for the cold. But nothing could truly prepare her for the reality of it. The wind cut through her thermal suit like knives. The ice beneath her feet was slippery and treacherous. Every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. But she kept moving. She had to keep moving. Taro walked beside her, his small body shaking despite his thick fur. The Volari were more resistant to cold than humans, but even he struggled in this frozen wasteland. He did not complain, though. He just held onto Yuna's hand and followed wherever she led. They needed shelter. That was the first priority. Yuna found a small cave in the side of an ice cliff, just big enough for the two of them. She used a heating pack from her supplies to warm the space and covered the entrance with blocks of packed snow to block the wind. That night, huddled together in the tiny cave, Yuna held Taro against her chest. He could feel her heartbeat, that steady rhythm that had first brought him peace. The sound helped him sleep, even as the wind howled outside their fragile shelter. The trackers began their hunt on the second day. Yuna knew they would come. She could see their dark shapes moving across the ice in the distance. 5 Volari warriors fanning out in a search pattern. They were fast and skilled, covering ground that would take Yuna hours in mere minutes. But Yuna had something they did not expect. She had cleverness. She spent the second day laying false trails. She walked in circles, doubled back on herself, and used the wind to scatter her scent. When the trackers found her footprints, they led nowhere. The warriors became frustrated, barking orders at each other in their harsh language. By the third day, Yuna had led the trackers into a narrow canyon filled with unstable ice. She triggered a small avalanche by kicking loose a key support pillar, blocking the path behind them. It would not stop them for long, but it bought her precious hours. The 4th and 5th days blurred together. Yuna and Taro moved constantly, never staying in one place for more than a few hours. They ate cold rations and drank melted snow. Yuna's fingers and toes were numb from frostbite, and her lips were cracked and bleeding. But she kept going. For Taro, she kept going. The cub watched everything his human did. He watched her build shelters out of nothing. He watched her set traps and create distractions. He watched her refuse to give up, even when her body screamed for rest. And slowly, something began to grow inside his small chest. Something that felt like hope. On the 6th night, the trackers closed in. Yuna could hear them moving through the darkness, their night vision giving them an advantage she could not match. She and Taro huddled in a small ice cave, trying not to breathe, trying not to exist. A tracker passed within feet of their hiding spot. Yuna pressed her hand over Taro's mouth to keep him silent, and he pressed his hand over her heart to feel that steady beat. Neither of them moved. Neither of them made a sound. The tracker passed by without seeing them. When dawn came on the 7th day, Yuna was barely able to stand. 6 days of running, hiding, and freezing had taken everything from her. Her body was broken. Her strength was gone. But they only had to survive one more day. Just one more day. It was not to be. The trackers found them at midday. There was nowhere left to run. Yuna stood on a flat plain of ice, the mountains behind her and the hunters before her. Taro pressed against her legs, his small body trembling. Greymane walked at the head of the group. The elder looked tired but satisfied. The hunt was over. "You did better than I expected," Greymane admitted. "For a soft creature, you showed surprising skill. But it was never going to be enough. You cannot outrun the Valari." Yuna stood as straight as her exhausted body allowed. The trial was for 7 days. The sun has not set on the 7th day. It is not over yet. Greymane made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You can barely stand, human. You have no weapons, no allies, no way to escape. What do you think you can do?" Yuna did not answer. She did not have an answer. She had given everything she had, and it was not enough. Then Taro stepped forward. The small cub walked away from Yuna and stood between her and the Valari hunters. His silver fur was dirty and matted. His golden eyes were exhausted. But his small body was planted firmly on the ice, and when he opened his mouth, a growl came out. It was a tiny sound, barely louder than a whisper. But it was the growl of a Valari warrior, the ancient sound of defiance that every member of his species carried in their blood. "She is my pack," Taro said. His voice was rough from days of not speaking. But every word was clear. Every syllable was strong. "Her heart beats for me," the cub continued. "She kept me warm when the cold came. She protected me when the hunters came. She did not leave me, not even when she was dying." His small hands curled into fists. "I will not leave her. I will not go with you. She is my family." The trackers exchanged confused glances. They had never seen anything like this. A Valari cub defending a human? It was unheard of. Greymane stared at the small child standing before him. This cub, who had lost everything, who had screamed with grief for 3 days straight, was now standing tall and speaking with more courage than many adults. Behind Taro, Yuna had collapsed to her knees. Her strength had finally given out completely. But even as she fell, she reached out toward the cub. Her frozen fingers touched his back, a final gesture of connection. Taro felt her heartbeat through her touch. It was weak now, slow and unsteady. The cold was killing her. If she did not get medical attention soon, she would die. The cub turned to look at her. Then he turned back to Greymane, and there was something fierce in his golden eyes. "If you take me from her," Taro said quietly, "I will never forgive you. I will never forgive any of you. She's the only thing in this universe that makes sense anymore. Please, please do not take her away." The word "please" hung in the frozen air. It was not a word that Valari used often. They preferred commands to requests, strength to supplication. But there was strength in this request too. The strength of a child who had learned what it meant to love someone. Greymane was silent for a long time. The elder had lived for many years. He had seen wars and peace, birth and death, triumph and tragedy. He had thought he understood what it meant to be Valari. Strength, honor, the way of the warrior. But looking at this small cub, standing in the frozen wasteland with a dying human behind him, Greymane realized he had been wrong. The strongest thing in the universe was not a weapon. It was a heart that refused to stop beating for someone else. Slowly, painfully, Greymane knelt on the ice. He lowered his head until it was level with Taro's. "The trial is complete," the elder said. His voice was rough with emotion. "The human has proven her worth. The bond is recognized." Taro stared at him in disbelief. "You mean—" "She is your family," Greymane said. "I see that now. The High Council will be informed. No one will separate you." The trackers immediately moved past them, rushing to help Yuna. They wrapped her in warm blankets and called for emergency transport. One of them carefully lifted her unconscious body, treating her with the respect they would give to any honored warrior. Taro stayed by her side every moment. He held her cold hand in his small warm one, and he pressed his ear against her chest to listen to her heartbeat. It was still there, weak but steady, still fighting. She had never stopped fighting. 3 years later, Yuna and Taro lived in a small home on the colony world of New Bizin. It was a beautiful planet, with blue oceans and green forests and mountains covered in white snow. Their house sat on a hill overlooking a quiet valley, surrounded by flowers that bloomed in every color. Taro had grown tall and strong. His silver fur was always clean now, and his golden eyes were full of life. He was training in the Velari combat arts with a teacher who visited twice a week. But he was also learning to read human poetry and tend the garden behind their house. He was becoming something new, something that was neither fully Velari nor fully human, but a beautiful combination of both. One evening, as the twin suns set over the valley, Taro sat with Yuna on their front porch. They watched the sky turn orange and pink and purple, painting the clouds with fire. "Mother," Taro said. It was what he called her now in the human way. "Why do the other species think humans are weak? You are the strongest person I know." Yuna smiled. There were lines on her face now, marks of age and hardship. But her eyes were warm and her heartbeat was steady, just as it had always been. "Humans are not strong in the way that most species understand strength," she said. "We do not have claws or fangs or armor. We cannot run fast or see in the dark or survive in the vacuum of space." She paused, thinking of her grandmother, of the frozen hell of Keth 7, of every hard day that had led to this peaceful moment. "But we have something else. We have hearts that refuse to give up. We love with everything we have, and we fight for the people we love until there is nothing left." Taro placed his hand over her heart, feeling that familiar rhythm, slow, steady, eternal. "When new species join the Galactic Union," he said, "and they ask why humans are respected despite their weakness, I will tell them the truth." "And what is the truth?" Yuna asked. Taro smiled, and in that smile was all the love and gratitude that words could never fully express. "That the strongest thing in the universe is not a weapon," he said. "It is a heart that refuses to stop beating for someone else." Yuna pulled him into a hug, and Taro hugged her back. They sat together on the porch as the suns finished setting and the stars came out. A mother and son bound not by blood, but by something stronger. By a heartbeat that had first reached out in darkness. By a touch that had promised safety. By a love that would never stop. The end.